Welcome back to Communicology. Today I'd like to continue talking about conflict resolution and how we communicate in conflict situations. So this is the third part of a series. So let's get into looking at conflict resolution and what it basically looks like. Now, when it comes to conflict, of course, as we've said in previous episodes, it's not always a bad thing, and it's a good thing to wrestle with what we believe and what others believe, and to get to know the situation better, to get to know our views better, to get to know the other person better. But conflict in and of itself, if we don't get past it, does become obviously a problem, and we have to fix it and move forward. So we have conflict issues that come down to the issue itself or conflict with actual people, and those are two different things. So let's look a little bit real quick at conflict with an issue and how we move from there, because conflict with issues can boil over into the realm of conflict with a person. So let's start with the conflict first before it gets out of control. So one thing we have to think about, first of all, is how to separate the people and the problem. So if we're having a disagreement with somebody, we need to learn how to separate those two. Now, if we're already on really good terms with the other person, that's not too terribly hard. But if we feel that there's some kind of connection, like the other person's trying to create this problem, you can see where this would be instantly difficult. So this is a hard part, and it requires a lot of maturity on your part and on their part as well. But if you're going to walk into that situation, you're in charge of you. So I need to work very hard at separating the person from the problem. That's the first step. I need to understand how to do that. And then from there, I start looking at what are our shared interests that we have. So I have an issue, you have an issue, and there's this problem that we're trying to get past. Well, what shared interests do we have? Because if you can build common ground, then you can easily move forward. Because if we just look at your side, my side, it becomes there's this red line that neither one of us wants to cross. When the reality is we probably agree on a lot more than we disagree on, or we have, some shared interests that are worth fighting for and keeping, as opposed to just blowing up everything because of an issue that's in the way. Another thing is that we need to look at how can we generate options to solve the issue at hand. Now, again, in our world, we think of it very, a dichotomy of everything we have, and that's a logical fallacy. Very rarely do you have situations where it's one side or another and there's nothing in between. It's just one or the other. There's this whole array of possibilities. If we can generate those and start thinking through those, we can start finding that maybe we can find something that we both agree on that would actually work and work well. So that's a very important thing as well. And then, of course, base decisions on objective criteria. This is very hard as well because we are emotional beings. We like emotion. As much as we like to say we love logic and things to be logical, we still have emotional ties to things, especially if the idea that we're fighting over was my idea. Then I'm going to fight for my idea because losing makes it sound like I'm personally losing, and I don't want that. So that's an emotional tie. We don't have to have that, but it's one of those things that we typically do. So again, how can I find objective criteria? Meaning someone looking from the outside into the situation, what do they see? And sometimes that helps getting someone else involved, because just by ourselves, it's hard sometimes because I want to defend my turf, you want to defend your turf, and we end up, again, fighting over that and then maybe making it personal. And the other thing that comes into play too is the concept of just listening. And we've talked about listening before on a different episode. The idea of listening is a huge issue for us because we don't necessarily want to listen. We want to win. And I want you to listen to me, but I don't want to offer the same respect to you. And you can see where that obviously creates a great problem. So how do we get into the situation where I'm willing to listen to you, you're willing to listen to me, and we can actually talk through things? And listening means just that. Keeping your mouth shut. You can't listen and talk at the same time. I don't care how multi-talented you think you are. There's no way you can multitask that one. You have to stay quiet and you have to pay attention to what they're saying and give them space to say the things that they want to say. So listening is a major issue. So two different kinds of conflict, as I mentioned about the issue itself. That's called substantive conflict, and that's how we handled with the methods that we just went through and discussed. And of course, If it's not handled properly, that's where we lead into the overflow, that boiling over I talked about. And that's where we get to personalized conflict. And personalized conflict, that's one of those things that's almost never a good thing. Because once we start making things personal, things can get ugly really fast. And it's one thing if you attack my idea. Maybe I can put down the pride a little bit and accept that my idea maybe isn't as good as I thought it is. But when you attack me personally, well, how many people are going to just laugh that off and shrug it aside? If you've got really thick skin, cool, that good on you. But a lot of people today have very thin skin, and it's hard once you damage them. They don't want to deal with that, and also they're not likely to listen either. So when you start attacking people personally, they feel like it's a bad thing. Now, what's really bad, of course, is when you have somebody who can't separate their thoughts and feelings from their issue, and they think if you're attacking their issue, they're attacking them. That's one thing I've come across. Before I taught, I was a professional writer, and you'd spend all this time doing all this lovely writing. So in my case, it was marketing, communication writing, advertising, public relations, that kind of stuff. Well, you'd spend all this time making this great copy, and the editors would start hacking it up. And how do you not feel personally assaulted? It's like, oh, I put so much time into that. That's my baby. Well, in reality, editors are trying to help you become a better writer, show you how to be more efficient, or how to use better language, or approach a situation a different way, or structure your words or your sentences, your paragraphs differently. The editing process is painful, but it's supposed to make you a better writer. Now, if you claim too much ownership to it, then it does feel like they're attacking you personally. So that happens sometimes in conflict. People, whatever that situation is, that issue that you're fighting over, they feel like it's them. It's just an extension of them. That's a difficult thing to move past. And, again, this takes maturity on your part. Separate the two. Here's the issue. Here's me. So we just talked about dealing with the issue. Now let's talk about if we were dealing with me. So, obviously, if it's a personal attack, it's fueled by emotion. And that creates all kinds of issues, anger, frustration. And it could eventually escalate to physical violence if you're not careful. But it's one of those things that is a very painful thing. And it's fueled by perceptions most of the time anyway. I mean, unless someone actually did something that you saw happen and it unfolded right before you, that's one thing. But a lot of times when you see and think of these issues that we have conflict between people, a lot of times it's amazing how much this stuff is hearsay. I heard that you said, or someone told me that you did, or whatever, and they weren't there. They weren't, you weren't there in the moment. That person wasn't there in front of you. You didn't see it. You heard about it. So now it's my perception of what you've told me about what that person perceived about what happened. You can see how that starts to break down. The more that you get down the line, the more of a perception on a perception on a perception on a perception. And you can see how quickly that would fall apart and become a problem. But instead of resolving the conflict, we count on all these people to tell us the absolute truth. And they didn't leave out a thing, and surely they didn't taint it with anything. No. And now we have this false idea, and we're mad at the false idea. You can see that be a problem. And of course, we start thinking about people's character. We start thinking about their motives. Well, why would they do such a thing? And oh, I know, they meant to hurt me. They meant to do this to me, or they meant to do this other bad thing, or whatever they did. So instead of talking to them, we just assume. And assumptions are always problematic. And then, of course, people start to be turned into suspects. So instead of actually having a situation where we're looking at, here's the problem, let's solve the problem, it's here's the person and who else is involved and how are they, so you're instantly guilty. And, the question is now is finding all the pieces and parts and putting it together. Like we're Sherlock Holmes, we know the bad guy is, and we find all of these little things and just incredulously, they all just happen to go together and voila, it's a perfect thing. See exactly how they happened. That's not really how the real world works or should. I mean, we should be, again, trying to focus towards being mature, towards being objective. And then what happens after that is people start creating new problems, sometimes imaginary problems. There are real things that do come up. Sometimes people keep making mistakes and keep making mistakes and keep making mistakes, sure. But sometimes we start making them up, and then we start assuming and assigning false motives and things like that. Like, wow, I bet they also did this. Oh, I bet they also did this. You know why? Because they're like this. And your mind starts running wild, like it's the worst possible solution or scenario all the time. And you'll find very quickly that anytime you think of that person, you're always thinking the worst of them. There's no grace. Forget grace. It's out the window. We're all about assigning the worst possible motives to them. That happens very commonly in conflict with people. So then what happens next, of course, is that people, start moving to this self-fulfilling prophecy thing. I expect you to be the worst. I start looking for the worst. I see the smallest thing, and then boom, see, I told you they're awful. I told you they're awful because, that's what they do. And again, it could just be the slightest thing or a misperceived thing, and we're just going to instantly put that in the category of the awful instead of thinking, but that's unfortunate that happened. It's probably this other thing, or it has nothing to do with me, and I just totally misperceived it. We sometimes, often actually, we misunderstand how deeply our inner psyche will read a situation and then misread it. So again, if I think the world of you and you do something, I'm going to think, well, they probably didn't mean it. It's probably they're probably having a bad day, or maybe I misunderstood something. But if I don't like you and I'm already upset at you and you do something, boom, instantly, yep, they meant to do it. They're awful. That happens. I mean, I'm sure it's happened to you. You write a letter or type an email or send a text, and the person on the other side, they get it, and because it's you, they instantly think the worst of it. And they won't read it charitably. Even if you say, please read this charitably, I'm trying to resolve this, please read it charitably, and they read it with the worst intentions from the beginning. I know that happens, and I'm sure it's happened to you. It's happened to me multiple times, and I don't doubt that I've done it, because we're not free of that. No matter how much we study this stuff, it happens. So whenever I try to read something, especially with somebody I'm having a difficult time with, I try to get my mind into that mode of being a little bit more charitable. So again, you're going to find problems. You're going to look for them. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if I look hard enough, I'm going to find the problems and give me yet another reason to be angry and continue the conflict. And you can see that, of course, being difficult. Now, of course, we got two things at war with each other right now. We have thinking and we have feeling, and they fight like crazy because, our feelings are very, very powerful. You have that whole pathos side of things working, and you have fighting against the logos side. So we have emotion and logic and reason, fighting against each other. What's really important, and this again goes back to the things we've studied and talked about before, is when you're looking at ethos, pathos, logos, do not neglect the ethos part, your ethical grounding. Are you an ethical person? Are you virtuous? Do you have goodwill towards the other person? Do you have practical knowledge of the situation? Do you have those three things? Because if you have those three things, that's the necessary components for an ethical grounding. So if you have good ethical grounding, then you can start wrestling a little bit better with that pathos, fighting with the logos, and see how they kind of fit or how they kind of deflect and which one to give more weight. But if you're not going from an ethos standpoint, again, if I'm already assuming you're bad, there goes the goodwill part. I'm not being ethical in this situation. So if I'm thinking the worst of you, the goodwill's gone. Eunoia is out the window. So you need to be an ethical person. That's hard because, again, how do I think about goodwill towards the other person I'm in conflict with? Wow, does that take maturity? And it also takes a lot of pride to cut and break away from yourself. Most people have pride problems and they lack accountability. So there's two things they're fighting inside them. They don't want to take, they don't want to be humble, and they don't want to admit that they're wrong. And that happens a ton. So again, when you're getting someone else's, text or email or letter, or even if they're talking to you face to face, if you're thinking the worst, you already know you're not being ethical in that moment. So you need to figure out, how can I get there? And sometimes it takes a little bit of time and effort to, really get a hold of yourself and straighten that out. But you have to get to that point where your thinking, is clear, because otherwise reason goes out the window and it's purely emotion at that point. And if it's purely emotion, Good luck. Good luck trying to have any kind of resolution, because it's just that point. It just evolves to crying or screaming or whatever it comes down to. So you need to have reason and work into it from there. Now, there's this thing called the rapid advance process that I'm going to work through here real quick, and it's an interesting title, because it's a process, so it's something that we can learn. It's not like some gift that people have to solve conflict. It's a process, so we can learn it. It's rapid, which means you can easily, quickly move through the steps, and it's an advance process, not advanced, but advance. So it's like, how do we move forward? So I'm going to move forward quickly through this process that we can learn. So the first thing is to reveal the history. So what's the issue here? What's going on? What's the problem? Reveal it. And this is not just like a partial reveal. We fully open the curtain. What's going on? And a lot of times, either we only have part of the story, or on the other side of things, we don't want to know all of the story. Because when we've been hurt, we just don't want to know more. Let's just make it stop. Instead of thinking, no, to be honest, if we're going to resolve this, we need to know everything. Swing those curtains open and let's see what's behind the curtain and let's talk about it. So again, reveal the history, what's going on. And then we have to, from there, recognize the impasse. So that's step 2. Recognize the impasse. What is the thing that is between us? And again, this is hard because we have to look at this in some kind of objective term. And that doesn't mean you can't use things that are important, like I feel statements. I feel this, which your feelings are legitimate. I'm not saying get rid of your feelings. They're legitimate. Just don't let them control you. But it's also to back up I feel statements with I think statements. Those are important too, because that shows that I'm rationally looking at this, not just I'm just going totally on gut feeling and my emotions. So I feel statements, I think statements. And again, notice I'm saying I, not you. Well, you and you, because as soon as I start doing the you thing, instantly the other person's gonna start putting up their shields. Oh, you're attacking me. And no one wants to get in that situation. So if I want to solve it, I need to be thinking of I feel, I think. That gives the other person the understanding of, oh, I didn't know I made you feel that way. I didn't know you thought about the situation that way. And it could also expose things like, oh, that's what you think? Whoa, that's different, because this is what I think and this is what I feel. And now we can understand that we're not seeing things on the same level. Maybe I have more information than you, or vice versa. And by exposing it through I think statements, we find out that one of us is missing key pieces to solve the puzzle. The next thing is to release the past. Way easier said than done. Now, this is not the same as like forgive and forget, because the idea of forgive and forget is silly, because we're not going to forget. We just don't forget things. It's just releasing it. Like, this is this burden that I'm carrying. Like in Pilgrim's Progress, you have this huge, sack on your back of all the weight and everything. You can only trudge along with that for so long before it becomes overwhelming. You just got to drop it off. It's, again, easier said than done, but it's a maturity level thing to let it go. Again, doesn't mean that you're saying it's okay or good. You're just saying, I'm not carrying this burden anymore because I want to move forward. Again, it's the advance process. I'm trying to move forward. And if I'm dragging the past with me, that's not going to let you move forward. So then the next thing is to respond to fear. Responding to fear is also scary because, just like I don't want to go to the dentist because I'm afraid of the pain that's going to happen when I get a shot or get my teeth drilled or anything like that. So you live with the toothache for years and years and years. Just get it. You've got to get it over with. You got to step into it. And it takes some boldness, some bravery. And that is hard, because there are times you don't want to be brave. You'd rather hide. But hiding, you still have the problem. You've never gotten rid of it. So you have to step into that and say, this is going to be hard. And I'm willing to do it. And it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be worth it, because at the end there's going to be resolution. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I think it's important enough to move toward it. So I'm going to be brave and do this. And the last one is to reconnect to higher thinking. So again, I'm not thinking on some basic level. I need to be a reasonable person. I need to go above what I'm normally doing. And I need to really wrestle with things because, again, most of us are focusing on what's happening in the now, if not living in the past. What does the future look like? Now, granted, I know we don't know what the future looks like, but what do I want it to look like? To get there, I have to do X, Y, and Z, and maybe a whole bunch of other things. And I need to be able to think smoothly and think well and think clearly to get there. So that's an important thing to think about with reconnecting to higher thinking. So again, if you do these things, again, it's a process. I have to move through these steps. And if I do these things, then ideally we'll get to the point where maybe we can start communicating well again. And the problem that most people have when they don't want to resolve this is they do want to run and cut off communication. And one of the worst things you could do is cut off communication. That's not normal. It's not sound advice in a worldly viewpoint. It's definitely not scriptural advice, because we're supposed to go to our brother if we have a problem with him. We're supposed to leave our gift at the altar and resolve things before we come back. We're not supposed to just ignore and flee from people. We're supposed to resolve things. That's we're not meant to be alone. We're meant to be with other people, and we're supposed to figure out how to resolve things. And we're not supposed to wait. We're supposed to go and do it. We're told to go. And that doesn't mean wait. Go means go. So we need to get involved and talk. And talking is the first step. We have to be able to talk. So again, reveal the history, recognize the impasse, release the past, respond to fear, reconnect to higher thinking. Move through these steps, and your communication conflict issue will be better for it. I'm not guaranteeing perfect results, but at least you'll start going down that road. And that road's what you need to go down. And it's hard, but that's something we need to do. Mature people do this, and it's something that we should always embrace. That's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. I would appreciate that. And if you didn't like what you heard, that's okay. Thanks for tuning in this long anyway. But I'll see you next time on Communicology.